So I got my center channel for my speaker setup, came in today, and I went to go set it under my TV temporarily, and it does cover up about 4 inches of my TV when it's sitting there.
Yeah, that's a non-starter. I had a similar problem when I got my soundbar a few years ago.
Oh my god, my old soundbar used to annoy... before I mounted my TV where it is now, my soundbar was covering up, like... It's only like 2 or 3 rows of pixels or whatever on a 4K TV, but it still drove me nuts.
Yeah, so I ended up measuring how much my soundbar covered, and it turns out the amount of TV that it covers, it actually isn't where the pixels start. So that was an acceptable concession to me. Even though it looks like it covers part of the TV, the actual TV surface area that has screen, like pixels on it, none of that is covered. So it only looks awkward, but it's not actually obstructing anything on the TV, which is fine.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, it's not great, but still.
I am not so fortunate. And I also am not going to mount my TV 6 inches higher or whatever, because I like very carefully measured, like,
oh yeah,
for my
TV
line of vision to be exactly centered.
Yeah, TV height placement is critical. Like that has to come first before you place anything.
For sure. I still think I value visuals over audio. So what I'm going to end up doing, and this is like super contentious. I don't know how many home theater forums you browse, but I intend to mount the center channel above the TV. And so many people will tell you that you cannot do that. But the weird thing I'm running into is, like, any professional site I look at, they're like, yeah, it's actually better to put it above the TV because the human brain is much better at sensing the direction of volume below than it is above. So the directionality won't be as much if it's above the TV, which is what you want, because you want it to seem like it's coming from the TV. But everybody online is like, no, you can't do that. You cannot do that. Like, it's really weird. They're like ravenous. They're like just telling people to scrap their entire setup, buy a new entertainment center and everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put a floating shelf.
You know, this is really funny because, so a peek behind the curtain here, we record with our cameras on so we can like look at each other when we talk, but we don't post like video podcasts yet. That might come here soon. But I can see in the corner there, Connor, your TV, that's your TV, right?
That is
underneath
my TV,
your bookshelf
right here. Yeah.
So do you have space between the TV and the bookshelf?
I did check that. I measured.
Okay.
It's a little tight. I don't know how it's going to look, but I do have the space. Yeah.
So you're not concerned with any like audio obstruction from the bookshelf?
No, because it's going to be below the bookshelf. It's going to be below the bookshelf, and it's going to be slightly tilted downward so that it's firing at my main seated position.
I got you. Okay.
The only thing I'm a little worried about
looking at it from the webcam, it looks like it might be kind of
It looks tighter than it is. Yeah. It's there's decidedly more space above than below. I picked up this. I have the speaker. It's here. I picked it up and I held it up to make sure there was room and everything.
Yeah.
So there's room
good
to
luck.
spare. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to get it set up. I'll finally be able to hear what people are saying in movies. That's what the center channel's for.
You know what? The other thing too is, like I mentioned maybe last episode or the one before that, I visited your apartment. You have very tall ceilings.
Very tall.
Very ideal acoustically for a good sound system.
You think so?
I think you're gonna fill this room up really nicely.
Yeah. I also have hardwood floors though, and concrete pillars.
Yeah.
I have a lot of I need some acoustic dampening, I think, eventually. That's like further down the line. Some panels with some art or something. Yeah. It sounded horrible in here. I don't know. I know you cleaned it up for the show, but me recording in here, it sounded like I was in a concert hall.
Yeah, that first week or so when you were here without any furniture or anything, it was, it sounded like you were echoey, which was really funny.
Yeah. I love it here, though. I'm glad you enjoyed your tour of my home.
Hey, and welcome back to Game Talk. I'm your host, Emmett Beyond. Today I'm joined by Connor.
Hey.
And only Connor this week. Mike had some other obligation. Connor thought up a good topic for us to noodle on this week. Why don't you share it with the people?
I've just been playing my 3DS a bunch lately, and I kind of wanted to just do a little love letter to handheld consoles of the past. Maybe even give them a letter grade rank. I don't know, tier list. There weren't really enough to do a bracket. Of course, Ahmed wanted to do a bracket as always, but I only really know I've only owned like 6 handhelds ever. No, I haven't even owned all of these on this list. I've only owned 5 of the 6 I put on the list, but I wanted the PSP to be in there because I've done some emulation.
Yeah, I think every handheld, at least you want to talk about today, I have owned. I'm a huge fan of handhelds.
Okay.
So
what was your first?
Honestly, I miss them. My first was the... Wow, I'm trying to think, actually. Did I have I think I had an original Game Boy.
Nice. Like the DMG or a Pocket?
No. I had a Game Boy Color. My mistake. I had a Game Boy Color.
Well, Nintendo... I put those down as one thing, because Nintendo classifies them as the same. I never had a Game Boy Color. I started on the Game Boy Advance. I didn't play Game Boy Color until more recently. I picked up an Analog Pocket a year ago or so, and I thought it was going to be something I messed around with a lot at first and then kind of collected dust on the shelf, but it hasn't really been. The Game Boy library is really cool, and I like going back and visiting those. I played some Pokemon ROM hacks of Crystal. I've played a lot of Zelda Link's Awakening. I really like that game. I look forward to playing the Oracle games, which I do insist you and Mike play before we do a Zelda bracket.
No, but on the topic, and I think we can talk about those like emulation handhelds later, because I really think they're kind of they're filling that gap now, kind of left by the traditional hardware manufacturers because like everything is just bigger now, bigger screens, less buttons. That's the trend for everything, consoles, phones, what have you. But yeah, I do miss that era when having a handheld that could fit in your pocket, maybe fold with buttons on it.
Yeah. I mentioned the Pocket because I take that on the bus with me. I play it if I like I have one trip I go on routinely that's about an hour long. I ride the bus downtown and then I hop on a train to go visit my buddy Antonio. I do that every once in a while. And that takes about an hour total, and I'm very grateful for a handheld to play on that time. And,
I mean, today's, I guess, analog to that is you're just on your phone for an hour.
For an hour, and that feels like brain rot, whereas like neurons could be firing. I could be solving a Zelda puzzle.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could play your New York Times games. I do that every day, but it's obviously not the same caliber.
Yeah, just going back to the original Game Boy and Game Boy Color, I've actually have very few memories of this because I was so young when I had this.
Okay.
Right? So Game Boy Color came out in, I think, 98, so I would have been 5 years old. But the one I do have memories of, many memories of, is the Game Boy Advance. Mm-hmm. That thing was my first like handheld that I really kind of fell in love with. And looking back, that screen was just so dark, wasn't it?
Oh my god, unreadably. I had I mean, this was true of the Game Boy Color. I don't know if it was to the same extent though, because I didn't have the hardware, but Nintendo just refused to put a backlight on anything until the SP. I had an original Game Boy Advance. I think I got it day one. This is a funny story. My friend Christian had a Game Boy Color, and I wanted one so bad. And my dad, being a man in his 40s or whatever, maybe late 30s, math is hard, but he saw, the Game Boy Advance is coming out in 6 months or whatever. I don't want to buy a Game Boy Color right before the Game Boy Advance comes out. But I'm 4, and 6 months is forever.
A significant percentage of your life.
So I'm like, what do you mean 6 months?
Who knows where I'll be in 6 months?
I'll be an old man. That's how it felt. But I did eventually. I got my Game Boy Advance, and it was so much cooler than Christian's Game Boy Color. I could play Sonic Advance on it. I could play what I didn't at the time know, but was Super Mario Brothers 2. It was the original Super Mario Advance, the second remake of Super Mario Bros. 2, and probably the worst version of that game. I had all kinds of games.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the cartridges themselves, the physical cartridges, like the giant square ones for the original Game Boy, and then like the rectangular smaller ones for the Game Boy Advance. I still have so many of those cartridges just laying around somewhere at my parents' place. But my first Game Boy game that I remember is Pokemon Red.
Pokemon Red.
Yeah.
Didn't play it until I was already a man. I was in my 20s when
That's
I picked up
crazy.
a copy of
That
Pokemon
is,
Red.
yeah. I mean, most Pokemon fans are probably like you, right?
Yeah.
Just
I started
considering
on
how long
Ruby.
it's
Yeah.
been going. But I consider myself very fortunate to that. My first Pokemon game was Pokemon Red, and yeah, that really sold the magic of a handheld to me. I was just like, yeah, I can play on my Nintendo 64 for Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64 and whatnot. But and keep in mind, I had never played an SNES at this age.
Okay.
The first console I played was an N64. I might have seen like a Genesis somewhere, or like one of the Sega. I forget what order the Sega consoles came out, but like a Sega console at like someone's house once. But point being, 2D games were kind of like a new thing to me because I experienced 3D
Interesting.
first.
Yeah.
So like this little like kind of 2D low visual like fidelity game held a lot of charm to me. And it was just unlike what I had been playing prior, which is very much the reverse of a lot of people
The sprites in
at that
Pokemon Red
age.
are so bad too.
They're just blobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember discovering like the whole missing note. I mean, I didn't discover it, but like
yeah, but
people
learning
talked
about
about it.
Yeah, playground
Yeah,
rumors.
and obviously, there was no real like I couldn't hop on like a forum or Twitter in
Yeah.
1998 or 9 whenever I played it. So yeah, this was very much a people at school talking about it and then trying it out and like yeah, it was a time.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're just not getting that with like the Nintendo Switch so much today. It's too big. You're not taking it to. Well, you probably couldn't take your Game Boy to school, could you? They were pretty strict about that back then.
No, yeah. Back then, yeah. Like can you now? I don't
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
How does that work?
When I was in high school, I took my 3DS to school some because I had so
Really?
much downtime in high school. I would
I
play it at lunch a
remember
little bit, study hall.
like elementary, middle school definitely not. You were not bringing
I caught my first
handhelds.
shiny Pokemon in my Spanish class. It was a shiny.
Oh, nice.
Well, no, my first intentional shiny that I like.
I think maybe my high school
for.
was stricter than yours, or maybe I think just in general, school has laxed their rules over
I think
time.
that was it. We had iPads by this point.
Oh
that
yeah,
we were using for class.
Yeah,
and
I never
everything,
saw like an iPad in a classroom setting. My entire
It was
first
over
through 12th.
as soon as
Yeah.
they handed those to us. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that definitely changed things. But
Yeah.
I remember it being a very special occasion, like maybe like towards the end of the year when like nothing was happening. Teachers are like, okay, you can bring in your whatever and play it for X amount of time.
Yeah.
I remember I was in the band room towards the end of the year, we had smuggled an N64 in there and we had Smash 64 and 4 controllers and we were just having a blast with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, handhelds.
So what would you rank the Game Boy? I think
the Game Boy,
I'll put it at a B probably. It's a really, really, really good first attempt from Nintendo.
I think B is reasonable. I think because it is the first attempt, I think you have to give it some extra credit there.
Yeah. I think just library alone, the hardware on the Game Boy is rough. The screen, like granted I do a lot when I'm emulating it now, I have to put in a lot of work to recreate the stuff that was kind of terrible about the Game Boy. Like the original screen ghosted really bad, but then some games used that ghosting to do like transparency effects.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you have to it's fascinating. I actually learned Z80 assembly to make a Game Boy game for a bit. I never finished one, but it was fascinating to learn the tricks of the trade. And I have a lot of love for that console. It's also like the weakest piece of Nintendo hardware ever. It fascinating.
How did it compare to an NES?
It's the NES I think is 240p resolution. The Game Boy is 144p.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like
144p.
half
What a
the
time to be alive.
resolution. Obviously only 4 colors. It was slow. It was slow, but they managed to make some very impressive games on it. I think the Super Mario Land, especially Super Mario Land 2, is worth playing today, even without a remake or anything. It's just worth going back and playing Super Mario Land 2. It's just a fun Mario game. Obviously Pokemon, Wario got his start. Wario Land got its start on the Game Boy.
Was Gold, Silver also Game Boy?
Gold and
Or was that
Silver
Advance?
were no, they were Game Boy.
Right. Okay.
They were Game Boy Color
Color.
enhanced. So they
Yeah.
ran on original Game Boy. Pokemon Crystal was only Game Boy Color, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That sounds right.
the gray cartridges were Game Boy. The black cartridges and gold and silver were Game Boy Color enhanced. And then transparent gray cartridges and Pokemon Crystal were Game Boy Color only. So there weren't a ton of those, but the Game Boy Color actually had twice the processor speed of the Game Boy.
Wow, that's
It was
a lot.
straight double. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a huge improvement. But it was just kind of a stopgap on the way to the Game Boy Advance. Nintendo's done that a bunch of times. They did it the DSi was a little bit faster, I think, and had exclusive games. The new 3DS was a little bit faster. This is the only time they doubled it, though.
Right. But the Game Boy Advance, though, I mean, that's an easy
It was
S
elite.
for me.
The aspect
Like an S-tier
ratio was
console.
more traditional.
Especially factoring in the SP.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even there yet, but the SP is, to me, is still like
It's so small.
handheld design. Yeah.
The clamshell, it's so good. The only problem is no headphone jack, which didn't matter to me as a kid because like I was
Right.
like blasting it, dude. I was obnoxious.
But yeah, so Game Boy Advance had no backlight. SP did have a backlight, and what a difference that thing made.
What a difference it made, but it did mess up some games. This is another thing. I emulate these games too, and you have to be really careful with your color grading because so many games are extremely washed out because they had to make their colors so bright so that you could see what was going on. So early Game Boy Advance games once the SP came out, developers kind of stopped doing this. But the early Game Boy Advance games that you were for sure playing on that screen without a light, they had to be really bad colors. And you can even see it in the Mario Advance games that they kind of quit doing that. Mario Advance 1 is really washed out. I think by the time they released a second one, it was fine. They didn't do it anymore. Because the SP actually came out pretty early in the life, I think. I'm not actually sure what the date is.
It's tough just going off of memory because like
It felt
these
like
swaths
forever.
of time were massive as a kid, right?
It was 2003.
2003. Okay.
And the
And
Game Boy
color
Advance itself
or Advance, right?
was 2001. So it was only 2 years. And then the
Okay,
Nintendo...
yeah.
Wait, when did the DS come out? Wasn't that 2004?
No.
Yeah, it
no,
was.
no.
Oh my god.
No
The
way.
Game Boy Advance was only a thing for 4 years. November
Okay,
2004.
So, but you're saying SP came out in 23 and DS came in 2004?
Yeah.
That's blowing my mind
End of
because I
2004.
remember.
So it was almost 2 years you had the SP before the DS came out.
Dude, I remember what seemingly felt like having
A lifetime,
SP
yeah.
for a decade. You know,
Yeah.
like it felt like I had that thing forever.
I can't believe my parents got me a DS when they could have only gotten me a Game Boy Advance SP 2 years before. I can't believe they were ready to spend the money. Although these were a lot cheaper back then, I think. Even like relative to the dollar, I think these were fairly affordable compared to like a Switch.
But yeah, in terms of games though, for the Game Boy Advance, I mean,
Oh my god.
this unbelievable.
It was a Super NES on. It was the first place I played Zelda: A Link to the Past.
And visually gorgeous as well.
Gorgeous. It's one of
Yeah.
the consoles that feels like it wasn't held back at all. If you were making a 2D game, it probably didn't feel this way as a developer, but as a player, to me, it felt like you could do any 2D game on this thing. Like it was just gonna crush
It felt that way. Yeah.
Like I mean, Golden Sun. Have you seen those games?
Golden Sun, no.
Oh, it's gorgeous. A very good JRPG. Beautiful visuals. Not really my kind of game, so I haven't replayed it as an adult. But I just remember seeing it as a kid, and I thought it was like one of the most beautiful games I'd ever seen.
But yeah, Game Boy Advance, this is where I first played Sonic. This is where I first played Mega Man, right? I played the
Right.
Mega Man Battle Network games on this thing, and
That was so
that
fun.
really, I mean, I fell in love with that franchise.
Yeah.
We got obviously Ruby and Sapphire and Emerald,
Emerald and Fire Red, I still
classic
have.
games, Fire Red, Leaf Green, and I started getting like anime games for Game Boy Advance as
there
well.
were some really
Because
good
there was
Naruto
only
games.
there were only two anime. Well, when I was into the Game Boy Advance, there were only two animes I watched besides Pokemon, obviously, and those were Dragon Ball Z and Yu Yu Hakusho. And both of those
Based.
franchises had amazing games on Game Boy Advance. So the Dragon Ball Legacy of Goku games, very
Yes.
good.
Oh my god, yeah.
They were like Dragon Ball RPGs.
Yeah. I never had one. My
phenomenal.
cousin had them, and I thought they were so sick.
Yeah, they were great. And then Yu Yu Hakusho had a tactics game called Tournament Tactics.
No way.
And it was, I don't know if you're familiar with Yu Yu Hakusho, Connor.
I am.
But it basically just adapted the Dart tournament.
I haven't watched that far.
It was a tactics game, like a Final Fantasy tactics
that's probably
game.
sick.
And it's still probably my favorite Game Boy Advance game. I loved this game. I played it so many times.
I play a lot of Game Boy Advance on my Analog Pocket now too. It's not as good because obviously the Analog Pocket is trying to be a Game Boy, so the aspect ratio is kind of wrong for Game Boy Advance. But
so it doesn't do Game Boy Advance?
It does do Game Boy Advance. It just doesn't do it as well because the aspect ratio is not quite right. So you have black bars on the top and bottom.
Do they have like one of these analog emulation machines in the form factor of an SP?
They have emulation, yes. I don't know of an FPGA, like a hardware solution. But they have I can send you some clamshell emulators. The Analog Pocket plays cartridges.
That might get me.
It's not an emulator, it's hardware. So But
that it'll actually play your Game Boy cartridges.
Yeah, it will, and Game Boy Advance.
That's sick, man.
Yeah, that's really cool. I do just load ROMs on it because it's more convenient to carry that way, but you can play the cartridges.
Yeah. But for old people like us, that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've got the cartridges. And but I recently started playing Advance Wars. Those are super fun. I played the spiritual successor of Wargroove and liked it, so I went back. Tons of way more Pokemon ROM hacks on Game Boy Advance. The remake of Super Mario World I played to death as a kid. That was I had Super Mario World on a Super NES, but that was taken. It wasn't taken from me. It was a loaner from one of my dad's friends, and he asked for it back at some point. And so Dad got me Super Mario World on my Game Boy Advance, and I was able to still play it, and that was so nice. I played Yoshi's Island this way. I played a lot for a console that never got a Mario game. I played a lot of Mario on the Game Boy Advance.
Did I play any Mario? If I played Mario, it would have been like a Mario RPG on the Game Boy Advance, but I'm having difficulty remembering.
Did you know Capcom made a Zelda game for the Game Boy Advance?
What was it?
Minish Cap.
Okay, I did that. I knew that at some point.
I think they made the Oracle games too.
Capcom who made it. Yeah.
For the Game Boy, but yeah, they made Minish Cap, which is gorgeous. It is definitely inspired by the Wind Waker art style, but turned into 2D pixel art. It's beautiful. And it has also the growing and shrinking gimmick.
Right. I have to comment. The link cable. I have to bring this up. The link cable for the Game Boy Advance, the SP.
Yeah.
What a revolutionary thing at the time.
Well, that was on the Game Boy as well.
Really? Game Boy had a link cable?
Yeah, it was. I think the hardware was a little different. I don't think it's the same cable.
I don't even remember.
You could trade Pokemon I must have been on the Game Boy.
Too young. Yeah, so it must have had one. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, the link cable, and then I remember for the SP, we had like the wireless version.
Yeah, the only
and at the time, I felt like this is the future. Like this is crazy, where I can wirelessly battle and trade Pokemon with my friends.
To this day, I don't know where it came from, but I have 2 of those sitting around, and I only ever bought 1 copy. It came with Fire Red, and
you were probably like playing with your friend or something, and he forgot it.
I know whose it is. I'm like 99% certain it's my buddy Tyler's, but I've tried to give it back to him, and he's like, "No, it's not mine." I'm like, all right, I guess it's mine now.
It's been like several decades.
Yeah, so. I don't think he has his Game Boy Advance anymore, so it is mine now. Yeah, but it was really funny. My dad didn't trust my friends, and so he would buy me like a bunch of any accessory I got because he was convinced it was going to get destroyed. And so I had like 4 or 5 link cables sitting around. That might be how I got a second wireless adapter. Because he never told me he was doing it because he didn't want me to like be hard on my things.
I see.
Or me to think he didn't trust me. He would just buy them and put them in a box somewhere. Like this is an aside, but are you familiar with the Scanner's Commander? Okay, this is another handheld game that I was in love with. It was like a little Hasbro toy that you scanned barcodes with, and it would like create a monster, and it was like a Pokemon game, but it was all in one device. So it had a barcode scanner. You'd swipe it, the monster would appear, or an item or something would appear, and sometimes the monster would just join you. Sometimes you had to fight it like a Pokemon battle. Anyway, I opened a box when I was moving as an adult, and I found like 10 of these still in box that my dad had bought because he was convinced they were going to get destroyed, and they were like something you could pick up at Radio Shack or whatever. So he just bought a ton of them. It was very funny. I loved those things as a kid.
Did any game besides Pokemon use
I don't
the
think so.
wireless, or was that like Pokemon only?
It was just Pokemon to my knowledge. I
That's
don't know
crazy.
of any other game. I can look it up real quick.
So this console had a port on it for a specific game franchise.
No.
Is that what you're telling me?
No, because it just used it used the link cable port.
But like the link cable was that only used for Pokemon?
No, that was used in lots of games.
Oh, really? Okay. I only ever used it for Pokemon.
Yeah, you could use it for Pokemon, you could use it the Mario games had a multiplayer. You could use it for Zelda 4 Swords. That was pretty sick.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that now.
I guess
us just talking about this is unlocking a lot of memories.
There's a lot of compatible games for the wireless. Apparently, Dragon Ball Z Boo's Fury used the wireless adapter.
Oh, really?
A bunch of the Mega Man Battle Network games used it.
Oh, yeah, those used it too. Okay, so yeah, I'm remembering all this now. Yeah.
Mario Golf used it. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's fascinating. What I always thought was interesting was it could not, the Nintendo DS had backwards compatibility with Game Boy Advance games, but I don't believe it could use the wireless network features of the DS.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Which I found very frustrating as a kid because I knew that was possible. But.
Well, I guess before we get into DS, Game Boy Advance, I want to give it an S. I don't know how
you want to give it an S?
Yeah.
The SP makes it S tier.
The SP makes it an S, I think.
But I think it's only an A tier because of that launch. What sucks is I think the form factor wise, the launch handheld is the best. I love holding that thing. I love the buttons. I like a wide handheld more than I like a vertical handheld.
You're talking about like the original Game Boy Advance.
The original Game Boy Advance. I like the wide format and everything. I think it's more comfortable to hold, but you can't see anything. You have to have all the...
Yeah.
But then the SP brings the backlight and the clamshell.
Yeah, I guess putting it that way, right? Like the Game Boy Advance definitely had some flaws. Yeah. Library-wise, if we were just talking library, it'd be an S.
It'd be an S,
in my opinion.
But so would most of these.
We have to, so that's why we have to factor in the hardware.
So I think I gotta go A.
Yeah, let's go A. I think, Game Boy Advance, the hardware, I think brings it down. I think SP is like a perfect handheld, basically.
It's pretty good, yeah.
But yeah, if the launch of the Game Boy Advance had just been the SP, then we'd. I think we'd put it in S, but yeah, let's go with A.
Move on to the DS then.
The Nintendo DS and the PSP, which both launched in 2004, I believe.
So did you had a PSP?
I did, and I barely used it.
Can we talk about it first then?
I feel, yeah, sure.
I never had a PSP. I actually, heartbreakingly, I remember it vividly to this day. I was in middle school. And I had a couple of people had like won a competition and the prize was that you got to join a raffle to win a PSP. And I lost to a good friend of mine, Christian. And I was furious and heartbroken that he got the PSP and I did not.
Yeah, I do feel a little embarrassed because like as a kid, I probably really wanted this thing and eventually got it.
And then never played it, yeah.
And because like, sometimes, your parents are like, you're never going to touch this thing. And like, sometimes they're actually right about that. And in this case, they were right.
Yeah.
Where like, I was mostly just on the DS. But the PSP, like, I know it is a very popular handheld, way more so than the Vita. But like, it's the opposite for me, where the Vita was the one I couldn't let go of.
Yeah.
But in terms of games... I think I only ever had 2 games on PSP.
Wow, only 2 games. What were they?
I think one was like a Gran Turismo game, like a racing game, which I barely touched.
Yeah.
And the other one was Daxter.
Okay.
Which made sense for me. I was huge into Jak and Daxter at that age, and getting more games in that universe was a huge plus for me, but Daxter was definitely not. It played differently and was made by different people. So I appreciated it even at that age that, like, yeah, it's another game that expands the lore. I think it takes place between Jak 1 and 2. Specifically, like, at the beginning of Jak 2, Jak is being tortured for years. Which,
wow.
Edgy, Yeah. Everyone was edgy back then. So it takes place during that time period where you're Daxter while Jak's being held captive.
Being tortured.
Yeah. So... But that was it, right? Like, in terms of the PSP, I thought, like, form factor-wise, it was really good.
It's like that GBA, but better.
I think it had a good library, too, looking back. But at the time, as a kid, I didn't really touch it much because look at the alternative.
So my only exposure to the PSP growing up was actually pretty bad. This kid on my soccer team had a PSP, and we would play Worms on his PSP. Do you know the franchise Worms?
Mm-hmm.
And that game looks like a Flash game, basically. Like not to dunk on Worms, because I think those games are actually really fun in retrospect. But at the time, I was like, this thing doesn't look that much better than my Game Boy Advance. Like, and it's supposed to be a PlayStation and everything. I was like, what is this? But points in the PSP's favor. 3 of the top 10 selling games on the PSP were Monster Hunter.
I was gonna say Monster Hunter was huge on the PSP, wasn't it?
Well, huge for the PSP. You know, the PSP just wasn't that big.
Right, but like Sony, like this was the first intrusion into this space that was dominated by Nintendo.
Yeah,
and they showed up for this one.
Yeah,
like, they did support this thing.
Yeah.
Third parties supported this thing.
Right.
And I remember even at that age when the PSP came out, hearing about people in Japan on their PSPs playing Monster Hunter together at like restaurants or cafes.
It was huge, yeah, because so I've talked about the divide between Monster Hunter Mainline and Monster Hunter Portable, and this is where it came from. Monster Hunter came out on the PS2, and then Monster Hunter Portable came out on the PSP, and then you had the same thing for Monster Hunter 2 and Monster Hunter Portable second. They were called Monster Hunter Freedom in the US, and I don't know if we got Freedom second, but we got Freedom Unite, which was the expanded version of Freedom second. And yeah, these games weren't huge in the West necessarily, but they were gigantic in Japan. These were, I mean, the Portable series was by a wide margin outselling the mainline Monster Hunter games. Like, this is where the money was at for Capcom. They loved selling on PSP, which is why when Monster Hunter 4U was a 3DS exclusive instead of coming to the PS Vita, Sony knew that it was over for the Vita.
Right. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that like PSP and Monster Hunter were synonymous at that time.
I'm
like
I'm intending to play through Freedom Unite eventually. And the only like acceptable way I have to play it, in my opinion, is to put it on my PS Vita, because the PS Vita does, I don't know if it's hardware level, but it does essentially flawless PSP emulation. So that's how I'm going to play through that when I get to it.
But there was a God of War game on PSP, Ghost of Sparta. I think there might have been a couple. There was a Resistance game.
They look good too. The PSP, the visuals on it were better than the DS. Like, by a pretty wide margin.
And then one of the best Metal Gear Solid games, according to the fans, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker was on PSP. So the PSP and God of War Chains of Olympus, that was the other game. So this thing got insane support, especially compared to the sequel console, which we'll get to. But yeah, I think
it's an A.
I think software really shows up for this.
Yeah, I agree.
Console. So yeah, I want to give it an A as well.
I mean, Monster Hunter alone, you know, I can't.
You're right. Yeah, but the DS and the DS Lite, I want to talk about both because
I still have my original DS too. Yeah,
the DS, I much prefer the DS Lite form factor.
Way better.
To me, it was like the second coming of the Game Boy SP almost.
Exactly, because the original DS is so bulky. It's got that like angular. What am I trying to say? You know?
I know what you're trying to say. Yeah, it is weirdly shaped.
It looks like a Palm Pilot. It like did not look like a toy or a video game, which worked to its favor, I think, somewhat, because it was Nintendo appealing to a broader audience than just kids. But it looked like a device, not like a console.
What a wild, out of left field idea at the time.
I know,
for
this
a
is
gaming
pre-iPhone.
handheld. Oh, this is going to come with a touchscreen and a stylus.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people at the time, like investors, probably would have been thinking, like, what are you doing, Nintendo? But they just nailed it.
Man, they sold 150 million of them.
And they immediately justified the odd decision of having a stylus and touchscreen. PictoChat.
I loved it.
Like, even kids who didn't even have games, they were just on PictoChat all day. Plus, because of the wireless connectivity of the DS, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that again felt like a next gen thing to me, where I was just like, I don't even need to put an attachment on this. We can wirelessly just play together.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
And
right?
it had download play, so you didn't even have to own the
if
game.
anyone younger is listening to this is what it was like before Wi-Fi. You know, like,
oh my god, yeah. This wasn't before Wi-Fi. We had Wi-Fi. You could play DS games online.
Before gaming consoles supported Wi-Fi.
The DS supported Wi-Fi though.
Did it really?
Yeah, you could play Metroid Prime Hunters online. It was an online first-person shooter. Yeah, you could trade Pokemon. The global trade station. You could trade online.
Was that on DS?
That was on the DS.
Wow,
and
my memory's all fuzzy.
Diamond.
I was thinking that happened in the 3DS.
No, that was on Pokemon Diamond. This was huge. I remember. Not only that, it had arguably better online than the Switch, because I remember getting on Pokemon Diamond with my cousin Alec and playing Pokemon, and it had voice chat.
Oh yeah. So the Wi-Fi features didn't come until the later games though.
No,
like games like
Diamond
Mario Kart DS. That was you couldn't play that online, could you?
I'm looking it up. I don't know if you could, because that would be 12 people or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if you could play DS online, but Pokemon Diamond was not a particularly late entry on the DS, and it had online play.
So maybe I'm just misremembering. Maybe the only way I used the DS was like local multiplayer, because I never did anything online with that thing.
It was crazy. They got banned actually because of PictoChat at my school. We weren't allowed to.
I could very easily see why.
Yeah, we were playing DS on the bus, and I just wanted to play Mario 64, which had a cool little multiplayer mode where you would steal the stars from each other. But people were saying slurs in PictoChat or whatever.
Right.
And so we weren't allowed to have DSs anymore. Luckily, I was still
PictoChat on the bus though. I remember that too.
Goated experience, yeah.
Fantastic, yeah.
But I still had my SP, so I still got to play video games.
Yeah. But also, just I gotta follow up on that. Mario 64 in your hands.
Yes, that was game
at the time. It was just like this. How far we've come, you know, like in the future.
It was
for this to even be possible.
Yeah, no, it
felt that way.
So I remember. I think I've told this on the podcast before, but my dad, I didn't know the DS existed. And my dad one day was like, hey, Nintendo put out this new handheld. It's got 2 screens or whatever. Do you want one? And I said, 2 screens?
And you were like, no, that
sounds
dumb.
really stupid.
Yeah.
So I told him no, I didn't want it. But I went over to my friend Christian's house, the same Christian from before who stole my PSP from
Won the
me.
PSP, yeah.
And he had one, and he showed me Mario 64, which I'd played. I had an N64 and Mario 64, and I was like, this changes everything.
Yeah.
And I went home that day and I asked for one. I have no idea when I finally got it. It was probably a birthday present or something, but
I also have to shout out the slot at the bottom for Game Boy Advance games, and then like the top slot for DS cartridges. Fantastic. And it really made me sad when obviously like Nintendo tends to support one generation forward, but not beyond that.
Yeah.
So like it's not too surprising when the 3DS came around, there was no Game Boy port, but like,
right.
Man, that thing got so much use for me. Like I constantly had 2 games in that thing, one Game Boy, one DS, and I was always just, I was still at that time constantly playing Game Boy Advance games.
Interesting thing about the 3DS, I know we'll get to there eventually, but you can still put a ROM. You can inject a ROM into the 3DS, and it is essentially running it natively because the architecture did not change meaningfully between the Game Boy Advance to the DS to the 3DS. It can still play a Game Boy Advance game, and that's hilarious to me. And you could buy them digitally on the 3DS. There was just no cartridge slot.
Yeah,
but back to the DS.
So games.
Kirby.
So beyond
Canvas Curse.
Mario
Is that what it's called? The one where Kirby's a ball.
That sounds right.
And you have to draw lines. There was another one. There's 2 of them. One's on the Wii U. I think that was the Rainbow something. And Canvas Curse was on the DS. I loved that game. There were so many weird oddball touchscreen games. Brain Age, Captured the Masses, Scribblenauts. Oh my god. I do think Scribblenauts is more at home on a phone these days. But original Scribblenauts
that made the jump
sick.
Pretty nicely. Yeah.
New Super Mario Brothers. This was 2006. First 2D Mario we'd gotten since Yoshi's Island, if you count it, Super Mario World, if you don't. It had been forever since we'd gotten a 2D Mario game. So many good DS games.
There were so many DS games that I play by having difficulty remembering.
Did you play Spectrobes?
Spectrobes? No.
Spectrobes was that, it was like a dinosaur kind of collecting game. You would find fossils, and this was like a real showcase of what the DS could do, because you had to like polish the fossil with the touch screen, and then to get it to come to life, you had to whisper "wake up" into the microphone.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it was. And you had all these kids like whispering, "Wake up." I hated it. I didn't get it until I was much older and did not like it.
I also got to shout out Nintendogs. I mean,
I hate that game.
Yeah, I wasn't too big of a fan of Nintendogs, but my sister loved it. That's like all she played.
Oh my god, we got
and I do think Nintendogs was a good game in like broadening the appeal of gaming and console gaming, or handheld gaming rather.
Also, it was one of the earliest games that I remember, and I remember people I know getting mad because of Nintendogs wanted you to play every day. Bad things would happen if you didn't play it every day. Your
it
dogs
was sort of like
neglected.
A Tamagotchi kind of situation where you'd feel stress for your virtual pet if you.
And I still, to this day, don't love that in any game. But speaking of games where bad things would happen if you didn't play every day, we got our first portable Animal Crossing on the DS, Animal Crossing Wild World.
Oh, yeah.
I put 1 billion hours into that game. I played it constantly. I spent so much time. You could play it online. I did that a lot. You could go to friends' towns and hang around.
Yeah.
The multiplayer has not meaningfully changed in Animal Crossing since then, actually.
I somehow... I just missed Animal Crossing until the Switch.
Yeah, that's
somehow.
So crazy to me. Because it didn't move numbers the way it did on the Switch back then. It didn't have a pandemic to help it, I guess. But it did do well, I think. I really liked it. Obviously Pokemon was firing on all cylinders on the DS.
Yeah, so how many Pokemon games did we get on DS? We got
Diamond, Pearl,
Gen 4, 5. Yeah,
it's just
Black,
Gen
White.
4 and 5.
6 was 3DS?
Yeah, that's X and Y.
Yeah, I think you're right. X and Y was 3DS.
Yep.
Wow, it's so funny, right? Remembering this, like, I mean, these time periods feel like they lasted
like an
forever.
Eternity,
but in reality, it wasn't that long, right? But
we did get Black 2, White 2 on the DS as well, which was a more substantial sequel than like Emerald to Ruby and Sapphire.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the DS is really good. Especially the DS Lite. The DS Lite, the improvements it made it a more pocketable handheld.
I still have my white DS Lite.
That's what I had
just
too.
One of the most gorgeous console designs.
I traded mine for a 3DS, which I kind of regret now. But all I have is my original DS, which still has a Cyndaquil. Oh my god, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I know it was also on the Game Boy Advance. But I still, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon I was so hyped for. The idea of a Pokemon game where you play as the Pokemon was a game changer to me as a kid. And it was like the first game I ever pre-ordered, I think. And I was heartbroken because I lived in West Virginia. And back then shipping was not terribly reliable. So the game actually came out. And I think it was 4 or 5 days after the game came out that my pre-order finally came in. Because I had my mom order it online instead of just getting it at GameStop. And it came with a bunch of bonuses and stuff. But I was like 5 days late to the party. And that was very upsetting to me as a kid. Because like all my friends had it and had been playing it.
We brought it up earlier, but I have to shout out Mario Kart DS.
Probably the best single-player Mario Kart.
Yeah, what a revolutionary game. Because, like, not only was it Mario Kart in your hands, it was Mario Kart in your hands while wirelessly playing with all your friends, and I've learned today that apparently supported online.
It did? You found that?
I found, like, a not-so-reliable source saying that, but even if it didn't, right, let's just assume it didn't. Like,
it's still...
just playing Mario Kart with everyone in the bus or whatever, and only one of you have to have the game.
Yeah, everybody else plays as a shy guy.
How incredible is that? Yeah. Like, I remember doing that a lot as a kid, and that's a very fond memory. Yeah, man, the DS is just, I mean, this is an easy S tier.
It's an easy S tier, yeah.
It's probably the best, in my opinion, it's probably the best handheld ever.
I disagree, but I'll get
know if I would put one higher than that.
I'll put the 3DS higher, just because it has the same library and more features.
Yeah, I just don't like the 3DS, man.
Yeah, we'll get into it in a minute. Or I guess we're getting into it now, right? Like, I think we can both agree the DS
what's
is
next, right? So
we have the 3DS and the PS Vita, and I think I'd rather...
So I really quickly, before we move on, I do want to shout out the Game Boy Micro, which came out the year, I think, after the DS came out, and that thing was really sleek handheld. I remember getting this thing and just loving it just felt like a futuristic device, right? Like, the Game Boy Advance games looked really crisp on it, the screen was super bright, and it was just like the most souped up Game Boy Advance that you could get. And it's just interesting to me that they released this thing after the successor came out, kind of like just a victory lap kind of thing.
Yeah, they're really cool looking too.
Yeah.
So
All right, yeah, I just want to bring that up.
Let's do the 3DS before the Vita, I think.
Okay. Yeah, the Nintendo 3DS. So I think we recently talked about this one.
Yeah, because I've been
on an
playing
episode.
mine.
Yeah.
I picked up a 3DS day one, actually. I traded in my DS Lite. Or no, I had traded in, we didn't even mention the DSi. The DSi sucks. It was like,
yeah,
stupid.
What was the difference? It was just like a bigger DS, right?
No, the DSi was...
My youngest sister had a DSi.
The DSi actually has like the sickest design. It's actually better than DS Lite now that I'm thinking about it.
It's like a slimmer...
It's a little slimmer.
Design,
it has a camera. It's totally flat. It doesn't have that like DS logo on top. They came in some cool colors. Mine was like light blue. I really like the look of this thing.
Yeah.
And then obviously played all the same games. I don't think there were any DSi exclusive games, except there was an eShop. So there was like Flipnote Studio on the DSi. There was like some WarioWare-esque games that you could play on it, but nothing major. I don't think there were any exclusive cartridges. It was just kind of them like soft testing some of the 3DS features, I think. But I had one of those. I traded in my DS Lite for that. And then I traded in my DSi for a 3DS on day one. And there were no games on the 3DS for like the first 6 months of its existence. It was like Steel Divers and Pilot Wings. And Pilot Wings was kind of fun.
Yeah, the launch of the 3DS was extremely rough. It's so much so that Nintendo had to apologize and announce like
they dropped
their ambassador program where they gave you games if you adopted it early.
I paid $250 for my 3DS, and 6 months later, they took a haircut on the price. And it went down to a $150.
And it's just another case of like similar to from Wii to Wii U, right? Nintendo crushed it with the DS. No one bought a 3DS at launch until they made some serious adjustments.
I mean, really, the 3DS never did move units the way the DS did. I think it did finally catch on eventually. And I think some of the later, like, much like the Game Boy Advance, the 3DS didn't really get good until the new 3DS. The new 3DS added the second stick, kinda. Added the face.
New 3DS had tolerable 3D to me.
It had face
like the
tracking.
old 3DS, like the original 3DS, 3D,
you couldn't really use it.
Wasn't a big fan.
But like, look at the 3DS library. You've got Ocarina of Time
the DS
3D.
Games.
You've got the whole DS library, obviously,
which automatically makes it one of the best.
Ocarina of Time 3D. You've got Mario Kart 7, which is fantastic. Like, still a really good entry in Mario Kart.
You've got Smash.
You've got Super Smash Brothers. In my opinion, this is maybe a hot take. The 3DS one of that generation of Smash Bros. Is the one to go back to. The Wii U one is like forgettable to me. I don't care about it.
Because Ultimate basically is fully replaced.
Full replacement. But the 3DS one still has some novelty to it.
And it had like that kind of unique art style too. Where
it was cel shaded, kind of.
Cel shaded, yeah.
Yeah. Ocarina of Time 3D is probably the way you should play Ocarina of Time now, because it runs at a decent frame rate and is mostly faithful. There are a few little things that I don't think it gets right, but it's a mostly replacement level. Majora's Mask 3D, Super Mario 3D Land, really good. Obviously, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. I haven't played 3 Ultimate yet, but 4 Ultimate got me into the franchise. I'm replaying it right now. It's incredible. I just finished low rank. It's a really good game. Maybe still my favorite Monster Hunter. Kind of hard to say because I like them all so much.
I also have to shout out something that you're not going to like, but was an incredible game. Fire Emblem Awakening.
I've heard
one of the best Fire Emblem games.
Yeah.
And that was on 3DS.
I've heard it's really good.
And then Zelda, we've got Link Between Worlds. And especially if you compare it with the Zelda catalog on DS, I think, which was kind of lacking. That had Spirit Tracks, right?
Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass.
Phantom Hourglass, which were both kind of mid.
I liked Phantom Hourglass, but I don't like the touchscreen controls. Obviously, Link Between Worlds got rid of that. Spirit Tracks never really did it for me.
But Link Between Worlds, fantastic
game. If you ignore the 3D aspect, I think you like the 3DS a lot more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's no question. Yeah. I just think, I don't know. They felt like they had to do a gimmick but they didn't have to, right? Like they could have just put out a better 3D, like they're doing with the Switch right now. They make a Switch 2. It doesn't necessarily have to.
But the gimmick's totally ignorable. Like if you don't, it's not like
That's
the Wii
true.
U.
It is totally ignorable.
The gimmick was in your face with the Wii U and kind of annoying. The 3DS, they literally they sold 2DSs. Yeah. They sold probably the best looking 3DS.
They sold 2DSs after people were not too hot on the original 3DS.
Well, it wasn't just that. The 2DS was way cheaper. It didn't have a hinge. It was for kids because kids couldn't use the 3D. It was bad for their eyes. Maybe I think the jury's still out on that, but it was maybe bad for kids' eyes. So the 2DS was like a slab. It didn't have the hinge, so that was like one less failure point for kids to break. And it was like $80 or something. They were like really, really cheap.
And to play devil's advocate, in support of the 3D, the glasses-free 3D at the time was kind of mind-blowing.
It was
just like, it's like, wow, Nintendo figured out this tech to where you can see these visuals without glasses. And the
handful of games,
especially at the time, because like at the time, like 3D was
huge.
A huge craze, right? You got the 3D movies, 3D TVs were more popular. But those all required glasses, whereas this did not.
And the games that actually used the 3D, I will stand by, like, for gameplay, I will stand by them being really cool. I think the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Super Mario 3D Land, which had rooms where the camera perspective was such that if you had the 3D off, it looked like a 2D Mario game. But if you turned the 3D on, you could tell that some stuff was closer, and you could, like, navigate the maze. It worked. It was cool. And it solved a problem that 3D platformers have always had, which is that depth is tricky. And they've always had to do shortcuts to get around it. And this proved, like, no, actually, you don't. Like, we can do it now. And then they dropped it and never did it again, of course.
Yeah, just talking through it now, like, I think you've convinced me.
It's an S tier, dude.
I think it is an S tier. Especially on the strength of the games alone, I think you have to put it there.
I love the circle pad.
Even though, like, I will say, it was certainly not as ubiquitous as the Game Boy Advance or the DS, but it was a strong console.
The circle pad, I like a lot.
That was cool as well.
It was really
I was a
cool.
fan of that.
The only disadvantage is that it can't click. Other than that, I think it's like just straight up almost better than a joystick for a portable console. I really like the way it feels. And then we didn't. So another story. I think I've already told this, but I'm going to tell it again. I traded in my 3DS. I had just been broken up with. My first girlfriend broke up with me, and I to cheer myself up, traded in my original 3DS for a new 3DS XL in the like galaxy black color, I think it was. And I picked up a copy of Monster Hunter 4U, and I loved that thing to death. But I only bought it because I don't like XL consoles typically. I prefer a higher PPI on a smaller console. So eventually, as an adult, I sold that new 3DS XL to a friend and finally managed to get this gorgeous white original size new 3DS. And I have like this sick KK slider faceplate on it because the original size had replaceable faceplates, and it looks so sick, dude. I feel so cool holding that thing in my hands. It's probably the best look. I have a lot of handhelds, and I genuinely believe that my new 3DS is the coolest one I own aesthetically. It's between it and the Vita. Yeah. The Vita looks really good too.
Yeah, so now that we've talked about like basically all the Nintendo handhelds minus the Switch, we're not going to get into the Switch because it's not a full handheld, right? It's a hybrid.
Right.
I do miss it, right? Like obviously the Switch has kind of taken over both of Nintendo's handheld and console ecosystems, and that's fine and probably the smarter thing business-wise for them to do. But I have intense nostalgia for those dedicated Nintendo handhelds, and I don't think they'll ever come back.
No, even the Switch, the lack of handheld-centric games is a thing that I miss a little bit. But what I really miss is the form factor. The Switch is just a little too big. It's not even that I do put it in my pocket, I don't think, because I don't remember ever doing that with my 3DS, like ever a single time. I don't think I ever slid it in my pocket and went somewhere because I always had a backpack. I was going to school, I was going to a buddy's house. It was in a backpack. So it literally fit in places that a Switch fits. Yeah. Certainly not.
I always kept DS, Game Boy. I always kept those in my pocket.
I just never put it. I was a weird kid. I never put anything in my pocket. Like my pockets were just empty. I don't know why. But something about that form factor, it's cozier. I don't know. It's more intimate, maybe. And
Yeah, I mean, if Nintendo, like, let's say 5-6 years into the Switch 2's life cycle, they release a Switch 2 Mini, which is basically just a handheld, that would be sick. I would be all about that. But like you said, the games, right? Like the
yeah,
games
the
are not
games.
purpose built for handheld anymore, which is a shame, I think.
I will say. So do we? I think I want to talk about the PS Vita before I get into what I was about to say.
Okay, I think this is the final console,
So
right?
yeah.
Discuss.
Well, okay. Actually, I have one more note about the 3DS. The 3DS is actually still sick today. It's like it's almost a meme at this point. People saying how easy it is, but modding a 3DS is like really, really easy. You can do it very quickly. All you have to do is throw some files on an SD card and put it in, and that unlocks like you can get back online. There's a thing called Pretendo. A lot of the 3DS's online games are still playable through Pretendo. Obviously you can pirate games if that's what you're into. You can also like emulate. It's an emulation beast. It can do NES, Super NES. It can't do N64 very well, but there is a native port of Super Mario 64 for the 3DS that's really good. I've speedrun it. You can still do backwards long jumps in it. It's really fun. And it has the 3D. The 3D works in it, and it looks really good. Obviously, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, all of those you can play on there. It's really sick. But all of that said, the PS Vita is actually a much better and easier console to mod because you have Game Boy Advance, PSP. Now, I guess you lose the DS and 3DS libraries that way. But the PS Vita was the first console I ever modded because Sony never released any games for it, so I had to get games for it somehow.
The PS Vita is really just a tragedy, I think, because it is the opposite of all these successful Nintendo consoles in that they really just nailed the hardware. They nailed it so hard.
First OLED
but they
I
just
ever owned.
didn't support.
There's no games.
The software wasn't there. The software
lack
was
of
just
Monster
not there.
Hunter. I really do. Like I learned that today. That I guess like it was a heartbreaking surprise to Sony at the time that Monster Hunter was skipping the PS Vita, and that really did kill them, I think, because
they saw the writing on the wall though, because like from Capcom's perspective, you look at how many consoles or how many units the DS sold. The DS, right? Just staggering, right?
Yeah.
And you compare that to the PSP, which sold very well as well, but not DS.
Yeah.
So it made sense from their perspective. But that really, I do think that doomed the PS Vita because, like we said, the PSP was Monster Hunter Town.
I love the way the PS Vita feels in my hands, though. I love the back touch screen.
Huge fan of both of those things.
The look of that OLED screen.
Yeah.
It's like 940p, something like that. No, that's too high. What is it?
That's too high. Probably
540?
Probably 720, I think.
I don't think it was 720. It's lower than that. I think it's 540. It's like 9 something by 540, I think. But it's
yeah, you're right, 544.
It's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful screen. It had Little Big Planet. This was like the dawn of remote play. You could pick up your Vita and you could play, and it never really worked because you didn't have enough buttons. You didn't have L2, R2.
But you had the back touchpads for that.
But you didn't have L3, R3 either. And that didn't work so well.
But like the few games that did come to this thing, I enjoyed. Like I think
Uncharted
at the time,
Golden Abyss is incredible.
Golden Abyss was great. Did you ever play Guacamelee?
No, was it that? Yeah.
Originally, that was a Vita exclusive.
Really, Vita was actually really well supported by indies.
It was,
in general. Yeah. In fact, far longer.
Guacamelee was a really fun Metroidvania game. I really enjoyed that game. I actually platinumed that game.
Really?
I played the crap out of that game.
Indies supported the Vita a lot longer than Sony did. Gravity Rush, I hear, is incredible.
Gravity Rush is really good.
It really did feel
available on
PS4,
the mainline consoles as well. But like, that was an exclusive at the time as well.
This is the first one that felt like a home console in your hands. It really did at the time. Like Little Big Planet Vita, to me, graphically, was indistinguishable from Little Big Planet 2 on the PS3.
Yeah. No, the games looked fantastic on this thing.
Yeah.
Definitely helped by the OLED.
Yeah, I was going to say, it actually probably looked better.
Persona 4 Golden.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Persona 4 Golden on this thing, it straight up changed my life. I don't care how corny that sounds. That was a transformative game for me, and I first played that in college. So like even like that late, like beyond my adolescent years or whatever, I had this experience with this handheld that like cemented the Vita to me as like, this is one of my favorite handhelds.
So this is like the millionth story I think I've already told on the show, but I'm going to tell again in case we have new listeners. I did not buy my PlayStation Vita. I actually won it. Those of you that were around at the time may remember Taco Bell was doing a giveaway. You had to buy a $5 box, I think it was called. So I guess I arguably paid.
You actually won from one of those things?
I saw crazy. It. They said in their disclaimer they were giving away a PS Vita every 5 minutes, is what it said. So I have no idea if this actually had anything to do with my victory, but you could enter an unlimited number of times with one box. I won on my first entry.
That's crazy, dude.
And I did it at 5:30 in the morning because I was convinced no one else would be doing it.
Taco Bell actually does this quite often. Still, they do things like give away like Xboxes or whatever.
It is such a pain to get it from them.
And they, well, I mean, apparently you said like every 5 minutes, right? They still do that, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're like, yeah, we have so many of these things, we're giving them away.
Yeah.
Which I guess bodes kind of well for you winning one, the odds of you winning one.
Yeah, that was why
you're the first person I've actually talked to who's actually won something from one of these things.
They kind of screwed me because I had an Android phone, so that was probably part of it. But you had to use their app, and their app broke. Okay. It said "you win" in big like letters or whatever, and I was like, okay. And then the app froze, and I was like, what do I do?
No,
like, I can't get in.
That's
and I ended
awful.
up screenshotting it like a million times, and I ended up calling them, and I said, hey, I won this, and I don't remember this super well, but I don't think they had me prove it.
That's crazy.
They just like, I told them I won it on the phone on support, and they were like, okay, what's your address?
That's funny.
Yeah. But what
a win though.
I was so excited because I couldn't afford one. They were like, it was like $300, something like that, $350. It's a really expensive console for me at the time.
Yeah. And like the first couple of years of this thing, this did have some first party support, right? Like we said, Uncharted, it had a Killzone game, which was actually, I hear, pretty good. I didn't play it.
Surely it had a God of War game.
It did not have I don't think it had a God of War exclusive on it.
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure. Let me double check that.
It had really good PS1 emulation. That's the other thing I really love it for, is playing old PS1 games.
It had a God of War collection on it of 1 and 2.
Oh, wow. So PS2 ports.
Yeah.
That's ambitious for it.
So, yeah, this thing had a lot of ports too, right? It had PS1 games, PS2 games. There was, I think, a Jack Daxter collection on this thing as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of supported, right? Like, it had the remastered collections. It had some first-party games. But without... Like, I really think Monster Hunter was a big factor for the reason of this not being too successful.
And not just because I'm like the world's biggest Monster Hunter fan right now. I just...
No, I mean, like...
It would have sold units.
PlayStation handholds were synonymous with Monster Hunter. That's just how it was.
Yeah, and so that audience moved to the 3DS. And I do... that probably influenced the 3DS's rebound as well. Monster Hunter 3U coming to it. And then 4U being exclusive. Because 4U is the first Monster Hunter game to perform well in the West. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton to say about the Vita. It breaks my heart to say it because the hardware is so good. But I honestly lean towards C on it. I think it's the worst handheld we've talked about today.
I would give it a B.
I could go lowest B.
The hardware is really, really solid.
It's really good. And if you do mod it, like there's some cool stuff you can do. But it even like isn't super practical today because you can't do like particularly good PC streaming on it because the Wi-Fi chip and it's not very good. Like,
yeah. And the other thing, actually, we didn't talk about the biggest reason it probably died: the proprietary memory.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That
so
slaughtered it.
You want to get really mad?
Yeah.
Everything they said about the proprietary memory was fake. If you mod it, you can use an SD card.
That's crazy, man.
Mine just has an SD card in it right now.
I mean, honestly, like, yes, software was a huge sticking point for this thing. But that proprietary memory is just as responsible.
And it wasn't included
for killing that thing. Yeah, you had to buy it separately, and it was expensive.
It was really expensive. I think my Taco Bell one might have come with it, but
not a good proposition.
No.
But this is Sony, like, in their kind of, I guess, arrogant era, right? When they launched the PS3.
Yeah.
And then I think a couple years after that, the Vita came out.
I couldn't tell. I know I was in high school. So it would have been like 2012, probably.
So the Vita came out in 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. And the PS3 came out in 2007, I believe.
Okay.
So 4 years after this, the launch of the PS3.
Yeah, they probably should have learned by then.
Yeah, it's just a shame. Yeah. And I do think we are, I guess, looking forward a little bit. we're going to get another PlayStation handheld because it seems like Xbox and PlayStation are interested once again after the success of the Switch, but it will not be a handheld in the same vein of the old handhelds we're talking about. It's probably going to be some kind of. It's probably just going to be like a handheld with a giant screen that only plays modern games.
Right. It's going to be like a Steam Deck situation.
Let's just say not a purpose-built handheld with exclusive games on it.
Because I love my Steam Deck. I love my Steam Deck to death, but it's just not what we're talking about.
It's not the same. Yeah, it's not the
so
same.
big. It's so big that it's like, I'll play it on a train, right? I don't know why the vibe is different on a train, but I will not take that thing out on a bus. Like, it's like an event to take it out of its...
It's too big, yeah.
It's so big. It's just, I don't know. I'm increasingly not playing my Steam Deck a ton just because of the size these days. It's heavy.
And I do wonder if this, because I'm totally with you on this size complaint, but I wonder how the larger audience feels because, like, the trend is to just get bigger and bigger. Like, you see this with phone manufacturers, you see this with console manufacturers.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think people like the bigger form factor, but
so I think where it's worth
much
looking,
prefer the smaller.
So I want to talk about retro handhelds a little bit here at the end, and not as in like literal retro handhelds, but like these little Android devices that are made to play retro games, because they do come in a wide variety of form factors, and they're all relatively popular. And I just want to say, like, this is something I wanted for a long time. I actually remember when the Raspberry Pi Zero came out, which is like a little credit card sized single board computer. I saw that, and I saw that people were making kits to make like a little Game Boy to play retro games on out of these. And I'd actually priced one out, and it was going to be like $200 or something. So I backed down because I was still in college. It was like 2018. I didn't have the money. But yeah, like obviously that market does exist because now you see these companies like Retroid and Ambernic, and we get all these retro handhelds in various shapes and sizes. We have ones that are almost indistinguishable from a Game Boy SP now. There are a few like that. There are handhelds that are under $100 that can play everything up through like PS1, like really well, like great experience for Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Super NES, NES, PS1, sometimes even N64. Sometimes you can even do Dreamcast on those because the Dreamcast is kind of in that weird area.
Yeah.
And then if you jump up to $200, you're getting stuff that can play. The one I'm obsessed with right now that I'm like itching, like my finger, I've put it in my cart and my finger's been hovering over the buy button, is the $200 Retroid Pocket 5. It's like your dream device. It comes in Game Boy colors. You can get it in indigo or black, and you can get like a red and green B and A button with a yellow right stick and everything. And it has an OLED 1080p 60 FPS screen for $200. And like if nothing else, this thing is like perfect for PC streaming. And it's like a little smaller than a Switch Lite. It's so tempting. If that screen...
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if any of these is going to get me, it's probably going to be an analog pocket.
Yeah.
Because I just really crave hardware that has that form factor that can physically play my existing games.
Yeah.
That is really something that could sell me.
Did you see there's an this is kind of an aside, but there's an FPGA PS1 coming out soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not a portable. It plugs into your TV, but it is hardware level emulation of a PS1 and N64.
That's awesome.
And
I don't have any PS1 games though. So
yeah, well, you can just burn a CD. Their DRM's not very good. But that's beside the point. I don't know, these handhelds, I'm kind of itching for one that is like PS Vita sized that I can stream my PC to. I especially with an OLED screen. But the problem is, I already have an expensive phone with an OLED screen that is much a bigger screen.
Yeah.
And it's a hard sell to buy another Android device when I could just buy a controller for my phone.
Right.
I think that's the problem. I know because I feel the same way you do.
This. Yeah, we've talked about this in the past, and it's definitely from a position of extreme privilege and luxury where we're like, oh, I don't want to use my perfectly good device. I want a dedicated device.
My perfectly good $1,000 phone. I need a separate $200 device to play my games. Yeah.
It's really stupid when you say it out loud, but like, I don't know. It's probably because of the nostalgia, but like, I want a dedicated handheld game playing device. Yeah.
I hear you. I still think I am gonna pick up one of those controllers. This is kind of an aside, but or no, I'll get into that later. Never mind. I'll get into that when games we've been playing. But I've been looking at like setting up streaming on my phone and everything because the controllers are like $50 now. They used to be $100, and at $100, I'm with you. Like, I might as well spend the 200 get the cool handheld. But it's tricky.
Yeah.
I also they like go
Your
bad
phone
so
screen,
fast.
like your phone screen's got to be really nice too.
It's gonna be really nice. It's 120
You got,
hertz.
like OLED and 120 hertz. So
Yeah.
that is
And
the pro argument for it.
if you have a flagship Samsung phone or an iPhone or a Google Pixel or something, then that hardware is already going to be stronger probably than what you're going to get in these retro handhelds too. That's the other problem. Not that it really matters. Like most of those Android handhelds are going to run those games fine. The thing that's nice is you and I both have folding phones. So if you want to do emulation on them, it's pretty close to a 4:3 display.
Yeah.
So you can just do native aspect ratio and everything and have a really good experience. But
Emulate the DS games with the two screens.
you can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was doing a like GameCube recently, just seeing how it works, and it was fine. You know, the only thing is that kills your phone battery, and sometimes I need my phone.
And you need the phone, and the battery isn't as good the older it gets.
Well,
there's so many factors with phones that just make it an annoyance.
But the retro handhelds, especially the sub $100 ones, are pretty good. But once you're paying a little more, like $200, $300 for these handhelds, the new one's going to come out in 2 months. It's always the new one comes out in 2 months.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just, there's a very niche market for this thing, and it's people like us who have nostalgia, basically. There's no one, there's no, like, I mean, with nostalgia specifically, right? There's no, like, 21-year-old buying one of these.
I
just refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe it.
I don't think that's true.
I'm talking about, like, the hardware level emulation.
Oh, yeah, like the analog pockets. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. The analog
like
pocket is extremely niche.
For the general purpose emulation ones, like obviously those have a lot of utility.
The analog pocket was an easy justification for me just because I think it's a cool, like, pretty device. Like, even if it was sitting in a case on my shelf, I'm happy to have it. I think it's gorgeous. I just got no beef with it. I like it. I got mine in red. And I still do play it.
Very
like,
nice.
If I'm going to play a Game Boy game, even though I have like a million ways to play those now, I could play them on my 3DS, I could play them on my Vita, I could play them on my TV through my PC. I'm going to play it on the analog pocket because it feels...
As you should.
It is a superior screen. The screen is bigger than the original Game Boy and also like much nicer, but it has all these filters and stuff to make it feel like the authentic experience. And that form factor is right. So it really does just kind of feel like playing it on a Game Boy.
Yeah. Handhelds are cool, man.
Yeah, I love them.
I kind of am sad that the Switch killed them.
Yeah.
In a way, but
it's interesting because the Switch did kill them, but it also sort of broadened the market because we see these PC handhelds. And
No, I think the Switch was the right move. Like Nintendo definitely made the right move. But you know, like there is that nostalgia there, and that's why these analog pocket-esque devices are coming out, because people know there's a nostalgia there.
The Switch is S tier, by the way. If we're
oh yeah, no question. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's, I don't know, had a lot to say and we said it.
Yeah. How many games have you played?
2. I'm only dying to talk about 1.
Okay, I also have 1. I can go first.
Yeah, you go first because I'm gonna spoil mine.
Oh right. For some reason, I didn't even know what it was until you said that.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been playing Kunitsu-Gami Path of the Goddess.
Okay.
So do you remember this game? It was announced and released last year. It's a Capcom game.
I do, yeah.
And it's a very unique game. It reminds me of like a PS2 game. It's very narrow in scope, and I really love this game. I think it's fantastic, and I think more games should take a page out of this game's book. You don't have to try and do everything when you release a video game. You just pick a set of mechanics and really hone in on those. So what this game is, it's a very Japanese game, right? So there's a very kind of thin plot, which isn't really important in my estimation, but there is this, I guess, priestess, like traditional kind of priestess, who has the ability to like purge and cleanse defilement. So there's these places like villages and lakes and what rivers and what have you that have been defiled by demons. And you play as So, who is this warrior lady, I think lady,
That's how I
but
remember it, but I didn't play the
yeah.
game.
But So is this warrior who protects the priestess as she cleanses these areas. So you have your like kind of like 3D combat with So, but what makes this game unique is that the gameplay loop is like kind of like a tower defense thing, where during the day when you play a level, you go around, cleanse some areas, and you're able to rescue villagers and assign those villagers roles. So you can make one like an archer, or one like a woodsman, or like an axeman or something, or make one like a shaman who has the ability to heal other units, or make one like a unit that has the ability to slow enemies, right? So you rescue your villagers, you can position them on the map strategically, and then when night comes, the demon gates kind of open and you have to protect this priestess. And that's the kind of cycle of the game when you play a level, right? So daytime, you prepare, get your troops essentially ready, assign them different roles, and guide the priestess to the gate. And in the nighttime, you have to defend the priestess.
Okay.
So during the day, you can lay out a path for the priestess to walk, and she basically dances along that path very slowly, right? So you can't just, what I'm saying is you cannot just like boom, lead the priestess to the end of the level in the first day and finish, right? Like you have to be very strategic about like, okay, we're only going to go this far along the level because there's some strategic elements at this position in the map, like a barricade or like a tower that I could put an archer in to better defend you, right? So it's very much a strategy game as well as an action game. And it's just so unique, right? Like this is a Capcom game and it absolutely has that Capcom level of polish. And it has a very, I guess, unique slash beautiful art style to it where it has this really strong, aggressive depth of field. So it has a kind of dreamy look, right? Where only the elements very close to your player character are in focus. And then like everything beyond that is really blurry. Some people might not like that. You can adjust the depth of field in the options, but I think it looks really, really nice that way. And I'm just having a blast with this game, right? Like there's no, and that's it, right? Like level by level, they introduce another mechanic. Each level is more difficult and has more stuff going on, but that is the game, right? There's no like open world component. You just go from level to level. But the loop is, right? So you complete a level, then you unlock a boss level, and then you can fight the boss. And again, like your villagers who you assign strategic roles, you absolutely have to use them strategically during the boss fight as well. And then the level you beat becomes a base where you can then go and like use your villagers to like clean up the base, repair it or whatever, and get some bonuses that way. So this gameplay loop kind of feeds. And each time you defeat a boss, you unlock a new villager type. So the more types you have, the deeper the strategy, right? Because like you can have like warriors, archers, spearmen, like I said, like healers, sumo wrestlers, which are basically like tanks. And I just think it's a really well designed game. And it's not really like anything I've played, combining that kind of protect the princess slash tower defense with the action. And the action's pretty good, right? Like the player characters, So they have like their own upgrade tree where you can master different like sword styles and like abilities and like bow abilities, and so there's plenty of depth just from like a combat perspective, but you can also upgrade your different unit types too. So you can really just play this game if you want to focus more on the unit types, because they take the same currency to upgrade. If you want to focus more on the units and turn this more into a strategy game, you could, and keep So like weaker. Or if you want to focus more on So and take a more like aggressive role, like when you play the levels, you could do that too. So
Hmm.
I really like this game. It's a breath of fresh air, and it's unfortunate that it did not sell very well at all. Capcom has already publicly come out and said that this game did not reach their sales targets, which is a shame because I think it's a really well-made game, and I would like to see games with a smaller scope like this more in the future.
You get that
So,
with new
that's all I
IPs
gotta say.
sometimes, you know? You gotta take a swing.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm like Capcom, right? Like Capcom,
Yeah.
they can do no wrong until proven otherwise.
I know,
So.
they've been nailing it lately. Speaking of, I'm just gonna real quick, I finished low rank in Monster Hunter 4 last night, Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Still loving it. It was actually my first mission failure was against the final boss of low rank, Shigeru Magala. I carded 3 times to him, and then came back a little better prepared, like literally just items. I didn't get better gear or anything. And I beat him, no carts. Just, you know, learn the moveset in that one fight. And that's how I think it should be. I like low rank in Monster Hunter being a pretty easygoing experience, culminating in like one pretty tough boss fight at the end, and then high rank, they take the training wheels off. I think that's how it should be. A lot of people complain about how easy low rank is these days, but I think you should be able to enjoy that part of the game without getting like skill checked too hard. Because that's where most of the story is. My understanding of 4U. I'm actually pretty much to where I was as a kid now. Caught up.
Oh, that's good.
I'm not quite there, but I'm really close. And I see why I dropped it as a kid a little bit, because it does like have a hint of finality to it. Like you save the world, and then like immediately the game just keeps going. It's like, all right, we got more missions for you, and like it takes a little bit for the story to start picking up again. There is more story, but it's not as good. The peak story part of it is low rank. To my knowledge, I guess I haven't played it all, but that's the vibe I'm getting.
I guess that makes sense, right? You want your peak story to be accessible to the most people.
And then your peak gameplay, where stuff actually gets hard, the training wheels come off, they really start slapping you around. That's high rank and G rank. So I'm excited to play that. With Wilds coming up, I don't know how far I'll get into that. But the big game I played, Insomniac's Marvel Spider-Man 2, exclusive to the PS5 on PC.
Yeah, I'm surprised you managed to get through the game with the seemingly terrible state it launched in. I've been reading accounts online of how this is just a broken PC port, which is such a shame.
I actually did try to return it, but when Steam turned me down, I decided I would. I fiddled with the settings a little more. Thought I got it to quit crashing, although it did start crashing again 10 hours later. It had, I mean, even I've seen a lot of people complaining about performance. I actually thought performance was like fine. I'm on a 7900 XTX, so I'm kind of, especially if I turn off ray tracing, this game, like, no FSR, no whatever, nothing. It just runs great. But it looks terrible. You can max out the ray tracing, and it looks terrible
crazy,
in a different way. It's like the image is super fuzzy with ray tracing on. Even
so, what's wild is like, obviously on PS5 it looks great, but that doesn't matter because they've released Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales on PC, and I assume those looked great there.
And had ray tracing. Like, this is an abject downgrade, in my opinion, from those games.
That's wild.
There is no visual improvement on this versus those on PC, at least to my eye, because it's a little distracting, because, like, anywhere water is touching the land, I'm getting, like, white artifacts, like as if it was like peak luminance, like it's a weird reflection thing going on. And I was like, oh, that must be a ray tracing thing. I turned ray tracing off. Still happening. I was like, oh my God, is it like an upscaling thing? Turned off upscaling. Still happening. It's just a graphical bug with the way the game
honestly
renders.
Just think this port was not finished.
It's a botch job. Well, the worst part is
released it.
From what I've seen, the fan port that came out of the leaks, the Insomniac leaks included source code for this, and somebody finished it and released it. Apparently it runs better and doesn't have these issues. I haven't played it, obviously.
I don't know. Like, there's probably a deeper discussion to be had about what's actually happening here, because Nixxes did this port, and Nixxes seems to be at like roughly like a, I don't know, 50% success rate with their Sony ports. So I really don't know what's going on there. Like, is it a case of like maybe certain engines do better with whatever their developers are doing to port? But that doesn't even make sense either, because I think Nixxes did the Ratchet and Clank port, and that's a great PC port.
It's gorgeous.
That's still like a benchmark Digital Foundry uses in like all of their
any coverage of upscalers
videos. Yeah. So I truly don't understand what's going on.
No, I was confident it was going to be good, and if it wasn't, I mean, it was.
That's a real shame.
I left a negative review on Steam. It was that bad for me. And it wasn't something like I know we like to joke about my AMD card being the issue, but these are widespread. These are
Yeah.
people with 4090s going in. Digital Foundry put out a video today. They were playing it on a 5080 and we're having the same issues. It's fundamentally broken.
It's just not finished. Which
So,
yeah, I imagine, like, I don't know. I don't want to make excuses for Nixus or whatever, but like,
yeah.
maybe they're under a lot of pressure. Maybe they're working on a lot of things at once and something had to give. But like, you don't do this with your best-selling game.
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that? Like, Sony, you had something. This could have caught fire for you,
Yeah.
but now it's just another botched job, further tanking your reputation on PC.
I'll never
ridiculous.
buy another Sony game day one after this because I
Yeah,
didn't get my return. I was gonna
it's
just
absurd,
return it
man.
and buy it when it was fixed, but
Like, it's just I don't know. I think all of these late issues lately with Sony, I think can be traced back to basically the episode we did last week where
Yeah.
the leadership is just incompetent right now.
I-
Because this should have just been a slam dunk. Like, even if you had to delay it, who cares? Like, this is Spider-Man, for God's sake.
Some people
Like-
are theorizing that they rushed it out because of the Insomniac leak port that was done by fans. I find that dubious, kind of, but I don't know. All I know is that I got a broken product, and and it for the most part, like the visual bugs were out in the open world. For the most part, like the best scenes in this game for me were actually interior scenes, like sneaking around the school with Harry. I thought was really cool. Sneaking through vents and stuff as Miles when you're chasing down the lizard, I thought was really cool.
But that's crazy, man. Because Spider-Man's all about swinging through the city.
Yeah, but that was all stuff I'd seen before, and also like
Mm.
I just didn't really care. I didn't like the web glider. I thought it was dumb.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it controls.
I thought it
great.
was a lot of fun.
Everybody was right. It controls well, but I just didn't. I don't know. Spider-Man doesn't fly. It felt stupid. I didn't use it much. I used it as little as I could.
You can pick up a lot of speed if you use that thing, though.
I know, but you can also just like fly into one of those wind gusts and literally set the controller down and go get a drink. Like
I do think it was too much.
Yeah.
Right? Like they should have had it for shorter bursts. But it's not cool seeing basically Spider-Man flying across the city.
It was silly.
Like he should be swinging. So
I didn't
hopefully
really like
for
it.
3 they tone it down.
And but overall, I like the game. I like the improvements. Something I can't even really say what it was. It might just be, I don't know. I can't say what it was. Something about the combat just feels better about this one than the first 2 games did. I think.
Plus with like both Peter and Miles, you have like varied movesets, and especially we're gonna get into spoilers. So if you don't like spoilers, you can skip this. But especially with the whole Venom thing with Peter, and then ultimately the anti-Venom, like there's just a lot of mechanics to play with.
Yeah, I really like that. I do think the Miles half of the game is the stronger half, which I knew I was gonna think going in because I don't like this Peter Parker. I don't like Yuri.
Really,
Yuri Lowenthal, is that his name?
Yeah,
I don't care for his Peter Parker voice. I don't.
Oh no, I think he's great.
I actually I was joking with my buddy Tyler. I was playing this in Marvel Rivals, and I was joking that Spider-Man 2 is the second best Spider-Man game I played this weekend because I just think I like the Marvel Rivals voice actor better. I like I just really like Marvel Rivals. That's kind of an aside, but I don't know. I didn't really like the Peter story. I don't feel like he didn't have an arc. Like Miles Morales had a clear arc in this where he like learned to forgive, he learned to grow into the Spider-Man role. Peter's the same guy at the end of the game that he is at the beginning, more or less. He didn't learn anything. He didn't grow. He was and it was like
yeah, it's tough for me to comment because it's been a while since I've played it, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I just really enjoyed the Peter Harry dynamic.
I liked that. I like
out.
that they played Cigarette Daydreams while you ride a bike through New York for some reason. Cage the Elephant song. I really enjoyed their chemistry and stuff, but I just like, if you ask me what this game was about, like thematically, I couldn't tell you. I know it had themes of second chances in it, but Peter did not learn to give second chances. He did not get a second chance. None of that happened. I don't know. I saw a lot of. The only reason I'm even bringing this up because the action was so good, but I saw so much praise for the writing in this game, and I don't see it at all. They brought up a bunch of stuff between like Peter and MJ. Like MJ, spoiler, gets infected with a symbiote and becomes Scream, which looked cool and was a cool boss fight. But at the end of the day, that boss fight was Peter beating the hell out of his girlfriend, and she's yelling a bunch of totally valid complaints at him, and then once you beat her up, she never mentions him again.
I remember that being a pretty shocking scene. Because, like,
Yeah.
I'm not as familiar with Spider-Man lore that I think a lot of people are. I had no idea who Scream was.
I didn't either. I mean, I knew MJ,
then
but I didn't know the name.
when it happened, it was, like, obvious. I was like, okay, this is a comic book thing.
Yeah.
But, like, to turn Mary Jane into a villain, I was like, dang, that's crazy.
Just about everybody in Marvel Comics has had a symbiote at one point or another. It's just such a cool idea, so it's happening.
Right.
Speaking of which, I think this is the worst looking Venom I've ever seen. I do not like his design.
But how cool was playing as Venom, though?
It was cool. That's not novel, though. It's, we got it in Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, to me, that was, like, the highlight of the game. I was just like, this is incredible.
I did think it was cool, like, and I probably will download the mod that lets you do it in the open world.
And it was definitely, like, I think, a little bit of a preview for the Venom game.
Oh, is there going to be one?
Apparently, it's still happening. I mean, according to the leak.
Okay. I look forward to buying that 6 months after it comes out on PC, which will be 2 years after it comes out on PS5.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, I don't want to dunk on the game too much. I didn't like.
Yeah, I think I was warmer on the story than you. And again, like it's way fresher for you, so I can't really argue for it right now. But
I've also like.
Yeah, I thought the story was quite good. I do think the story in Spider-Man 1 was more powerful, especially with how it ends with that sacrifice. Like I thought that was like that pretty much brought me to tears.
I still think Miles Morales is the best of the three. I loved Miles Morales.
Yeah, I remember. Again, it's tough, but like I remember actually feeling disappointed by Miles' story in this game, where I felt like he didn't do much.
See, he didn't. I was that low.
But the mainline Spider-Man games are Peter Parker games first and foremost, so I guess that makes sense.
I was just that low on the Peter stuff that the Miles was such a breath of fresh air. Like gameplay wise, they were both fun the entire time. It's just like Peter's story. I didn't feel like they really did anything with him being grumpy with the symbiote. Nobody gets hurt in this game, like ever. There are a couple supervillains who die, but no innocent people get hurt at all.
Kraven's death was pretty gruesome.
Yeah, but he was a supervillain. Like,
yeah,
you know.
But I was surprised they went that violent.
Yeah.
In a Spider-Man game.
But Peter, when he has the symbiote, he's just kind of mean. He's just rude to people, kind of.
But isn't that what the symbiote?
No, I mean, in the comics, he was like...
Well, my only context is Spider-Man 3, by the way, so I don't know.
He had to get rid of the symbiote because he was actually really hurting people in his fights. He got really violent. And they did that in this animation-wise. The symbiote attacks are extremely violent. But I also, I don't like that they made Peter anti-Venom. Anti-Venom is typically Eddie Brock, who is Venom.
Okay, I wasn't even sure if they, made something up just to basically have him keep his Venom powers. I looked it up afterwards, okay, this is a thing from the comics. So.
I think Peter being anti-Venom is extremely boring because of literally a line in the game, which Peter says out loud, I have all the powers of the symbiote, none of the consequences. And and that makes it stupid and pointless and not interesting to anyone. I hate that because anti-Venom was a way to keep Eddie Brock relevant when the symbiote goes to other people. Eventually, Spider-Man's old bully, Flash Thompson, gets the Venom suit. And it's an interesting story. He lost his legs as a soldier. He's like a war hero. And the military put the Venom suit on him. And he grows his legs back and becomes Agent Venom. And he's a hero. He only has it when he wears the suit. So he obviously has an incentive to keep the suit. And that's interesting. And Eddie Brock became anti-Venom at that point. So, in a similar way to how Peter Parker did. And also Venom's muscular build and everything is supposed to be because Eddie Brock is wearing the suit. It's not that Venom is just buff. Eddie Brock is a superhuman to begin with. He can bench press a car. He's extremely strong even without the symbiote. So when the suit came on him, he became this gigantic hulking figure.
Okay.
And all of that, I don't know. Obviously, they weren't going to change Venom's design for this game. There's just they could have done something interesting with it, and I don't feel like they did.
Well, I think around the midpoint, maybe this 2/3 of the way through the story, another huge highlight for me was the Peter Parker boss fight.
That was cool. Yeah,
where you fight Peter as Miles. Yeah, I thought that might have been the highlight for me.
I think it was. Yeah,
dramatically and everything. It was they hit all the right notes.
And that was pre anti-Venom and everything, where Peter is Miles' hero, and he's why are you acting like this, man? We got to get this off you, tear the suit off and everything. I thought that was all brilliant.
Yeah, that was very good. And did you see the post-credits teaser thing?
Yeah, it meant nothing to me. The
So I had to look it up
yeah.
afterwards, but apparently there's Silk, right? She's another spider person.
I don't know. Maybe.
So I presumably we're gonna have 3 characters we control in the next game, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think from a variety perspective, and I think they do the spider heroes characterizations pretty well. I know you're more of a Miles fan than Peter, but I think both Peter and Miles are really good characters in these games. So I think they'll pull off whatever they're gonna do with Silk.
I think
really
so
well.
too. Yeah. But yeah,
So.
I liked it. The action especially. Like I found the combat kind of boring in Miles Morales and Spider-Man, but in Spider-Man 2, something they changed. I think the gadgets just flow better in this game. The gadgets and the abilities. Because I really was watching my combo meter. This is the first one I will, like, once this gets fixed, if this game ever gets fixed, that's never a guarantee on.
I'm sure it will.
I mean, The Last of Us never got fixed.
Yeah, it did.
No, it didn't. It still runs like garbage on PC, from what I've heard.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's never a guarantee that these things get fixed. So, but if it gets fixed, I probably will do a playthrough on a higher difficulty.
Yeah, I do plan on doing a New Game Plus run of this game at some point, just because I would like to platinum it. But
also, I know I'm not one who usually does side content, so this is a weird thing for me, but I felt like there wasn't very much in this. There was substantially fewer side quests than there were in the first Spider-Man. There were a lot of like side objectives, like going around and fighting, obviously stopping crimes, and there were like Sandman's memories all over the place and symbiote nests and stuff like that. But as far as like actual proper side quests, I felt like there weren't very many.
Yeah, I don't remember. I do remember the side content being more meaningful than Spider-Man 1.
Really? Okay.
There are like some missions with Miles's girlfriend, the deaf girl.
Okay. I didn't do it.
Where you play as her, and there's like she does some stuff.
Oh, that's the other thing.
It's a cool little story.
I gotta complain about this real quick. What were they thinking making you play a Mary Jane level as the finale of this game?
Yeah, man, like
that's psychotic. No one likes these.
They kept the Mary Jane levels in this game, right?
They're better.
I'm trying to remember.
They're better this time. She has like a taser. And
right.
shoot webs. So it's like a third-person shooter, and it's like,
but it's still like, why
would you?
You know why we're here?
Yeah, why would you interrupt my really good action game to play what is at best a middling third-person shooter? Like, I
think it's because they're insisting on Mary Jane's character as being one of the main characters, so you have to play as her. Just give her like a spider suit at some point. Like, make her a spider person.
Even if you don't do that, just like.
Because yeah, her gameplay is not interesting at all. I don't want to play a third-person shooter. I don't want to play a crappy stealth game. I want to play Spider-Man.
I was fine with it in the middle of the game, but in that finale level, it's like Spider-Man lures Venom away. That's really cool. They'll love to see what's happening there. Miles Morales lures an army of symbiotes away. Man, it'd probably be really fun to play that part of the game. And it's like, oh, okay, you're going to make me play as Mary Jane, who has no powers and is wandering into a hole in the ground. That'll be really fun for me. Thank you, Insomniac. Thank you so much. I bet it's so boring what's happening outside right now. I'm really glad we're in this cave.
Yeah, that was strange.
It's just very strange. And she also is like weirdly overpowered. Like she can like 3-shot the symbiote enemies with her gun. Which like if this technology exists, why do we not like use it to
Why is this even a problem?
Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Ugh, it's just really stupid. I don't know.
Yeah, I really hope they just give her spider powers. Like, who cares at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's happened in the comics, right? Like, everything's happened in the comics.
No, what has happened in the comics is she, similar to what she does in this, she ends up teaming up with Black Cat for a while and doing some stuff. That's really cool. Felicia?
Oh, yeah, there's Black Cat stuff in this game, too. I forgot about that.
This was not a disappointing level, but people had talked up the Portal level so much that when I actually played it, I found it extremely disappointing.
No, that was a cool little thing. It's not like a recurring mechanic.
I thought it was going to be this like crazy set piece though, and it was like fine. Like there was only one time you teleport outside of New York, and it was like a 10-second blink and you miss it kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean it'd be cool to have a lot more stuff like that, but like
that's what
I don't know.
That's what
we
Rift
had
Apart is for.
Was a cool little. Yeah, it was a cool, basically little like, hey, remember we did Rift Apart as well.
It wasn't that there was anything wrong with it. It was that other people had talked it up so much that I was like, oh, this is that. And then I played it and I was like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, Okay.
But overall, so
if
you've
not for
played.
performance issues, this is an 8 out of 10 game. Easy.
So you've played 2 Sony games in quick succession.
Yeah.
This year. So which would you prefer, this or God of War Ragnarok?
God of War, easy.
Yeah, I agree with
Just
you.
just
I don't think it's
like.
Yeah, I think like these Spider-Man games, they are Sony's like most popular games, but I do think I've said this before on the show. I do think they're a cut below like the really premium kind of Sony games, like the Naughty Dog games, the Sony Santa Monica games. I think they're just, like a tier below that. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a fine game in its own right. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's crazy that it's their like, I don't know, that it's kind of the face of the PlayStation in some ways right now.
It is, yeah. Ever since Spider-Man 2018, these games have been selling consoles like crazy.
Yeah.
And selling units like crazy. But I saw today, or not today, maybe yesterday, that this game only had like 25K sales or something on PC. That's abysmal for Spider-Man.
Did such a bad job.
And they messed it up. Yeah, like they absolutely could have had a huge audience for this game on PC.
They should have had a million sales,
They didn't. So.
But now it's like, could they do a day one? Like, if this is the best they can do 2 years later, they can't do day and
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Something is not working with their PC strategy, and I just we don't know what it is.
It sucks.
We don't know if it's a resources thing. We don't know if it's a Sony not caring thing. We just don't know. So
it's sad. That's all I know. I wanted to like this game more than I did, and I probably will when I go back and replay it and actually do some of the side stuff. I'm a sucker for Symbiote Takes Over New York. I love Marvel or Spider-Man Web of Shadows. I played on the Wii. It was also on like the PS3 and Xbox. I really liked Xbox 360.
And the Symbiote's just, I don't know, it's just cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
It triggers something in your nerd lizard brain, right? It's just like, oh, this is sick.
Yeah.
But
I do hate that he's just gonna have the anti-venom powers in the next game, though, right? Like that.
Well, so talking about the end of the game, he retires, right? But how long do we think that's actually going to last?
It's also like, just as an aside,
I do think it would be pretty bold if the next game was just Miles and Silk. That would be pretty cool.
I'd be super down for that because I don't like this Peter,
and maybe just like not playing as Peter, but having him like a character.
Yeah, him and MJ
but not the main,
like a side thing. I would like that. The only thing, I'm going to retire from being a superhero and I'm going to put it all on this 17-year-old who's still trying to get into college. What are you thinking? What's going through his head when he says that? Like, I don't care if he did a good job. He needs to go to school. He needs to get internships. Like, he's got to build the foundation for the rest of his life. Which, like...
But, I mean, Peter was a Spider-Man during that age, too.
Yeah, look where it got him. His life sucks. Also, MJ...
That's true.
There's like a big triumphant moment where MJ calls you and she's like, yeah, me, the breadwinner for our family, the only one that has a solid income. I quit my job. What? What do you mean you quit your job? We have a mortgage. What were you thinking?
Yeah, Peter is a bit of a hot mess in these games, but
I did not like that. I have beef with other stuff, but the way they handle MJ in these games, the way they write her, is bad. It's really bad. They don't know how to write women. It's like really, really bad. Or maybe they do and they're just choosing not to, because like all the stuff she yelled about when she was Scream kind of made sense to me. But like then they don't address it at all and she quits her job and moves in to be like to live with Peter.
So wait. I'm trying to remember. Are either of them employed?
No, they're both unemployed. I assume because they, Harry gave Peter a job, and I don't imagine that job's still around.
Right, because they basically like killed each other and destroyed the workplace as well.
And then MJ quits her job with J. Jonah Jameson because she hates him. Like, which sure, but I'm a big believer in don't quit your job until you have a new job. It's being unemployed isn't super fun,
especially in New York.
Yeah.
What are they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, you see his payment. He owes like $4,600 a month on this house because he lives in a single family home in New York. Like, that's expensive, brother. And also, he's like pestering MJ to move to that house with him, and she's like, no, I want to live in the city. And the conclusion of the game is that no, Peter was right. Nobody wants to live in the city. Like, shut up, Insomniac. You don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Okay, so this is spoilers for Spider-Man 1 now, right? So, like, didn't he inherit the house?
He did
when
inherit
May
the house,
died?
but he owes money on it. She had mortgaged it to fund Feast.
Oh, wow.
He owes over
okay.
$500,000 on it, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Also, they destroyed it during their fight.
They destroyed the
They
Vista-
didn't like
or-
no the house.
Oh, May's house.
They
With
didn't
the screen
destroy
thing?
it, but
Yeah.
they knocked down one wall. It was still standing, but
Okay, yeah.
not great. Not exactly the life of luxury.
But it's Peter's like a genius level intellect, though. I'm sure he could get a job if he really. Maybe now that he's not Spider-Man.
Yeah, he could hold down a job now
yeah.
if he can find somewhere that hasn't already fired him, because it's implied that he's gone through a lot of jobs. Like he was, teaching at a high school at the beginning of the game, which is like, can't imagine it's doing a great job of paying the bills. Although I don't know what private school teachers make in New York. It actually could have been a good gig, because it's like a very prestigious private school that Miles goes to.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously they're gonna be doing Goblin for Spider-Man 3, right?
Yeah,
that just makes sense.
Yeah, but is it gonna be Harry again?
His greatest nemesis? It can't be, right? That'd be kind of weird.
It'd be dumb.
Yeah,
it's probably gonna be Norman.
No, I mean Norman was in the game, right? Norman Osborn. He was a big character in this game, actually. So it'll probably be him distraught over his son's loss. I still think Harry's alive, but
yeah. Well, I think that the symbiote comes back. They can't get rid of the symbiote.
Yeah. Well, there's actually so this might actually be a spoiler you care about. So maybe I won't talk about it, but there is a side quest chain where you find out like what will probably happen to the symbiote going forward.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me which one so I can play it?
I don't remember which one it is, but I don't know. Should I just say it?
Nah. Well,
okay.
Well, you can tell me after the show.
Okay. All right. But I think that's enough.
That's enough Spider-Man. Yeah. I hate that I had to be kind of angry about it, because it's a good game.
No, I mean it's totally justified. I mean, like, there's no excuse for putting out a game in that state, especially when you're someone like Sony. Yeah, like, I don't know, if Nixus needed more time, they should have just given it to them. Like, I don't care really what the excuse was there.
I mean, the crashes were bad. It was like, I raged a few times because sometimes you would die, and I don't know how hard these games are for other people, but I'm just not that good at them, so I died a decent amount playing through this game.
This game was harder than Spider-Man 1 and Miles Morales, I remember.
And sometimes when I died, it would crash, and I would be like about to snap a controller.
That's really frustrating, because you have to replay the section.
No, because they had to know these crashes were constant, because there were checkpoints. There were checkpoints in the middle of cutscenes. The cutscenes would pick up in the middle, so they had to know this was crashing all the time and just put a bunch of checkpoints in. Because I crashed during the final cutscene, and it picked up basically right where I crashed. Like, it's that kind of thing. Like, come on, guys. Like, you shouldn't release it if you're having issues so bad you're having to do something like that.
Yeah, and I guess looking back now, the writing was kind of on the wall. They didn't advertise this thing at all.
No, we mentioned it on the show.
Say anything about it, and now we know the reason why.
Yeah.
They should have just delayed it.
Absolutely. Because I think
something Shigeru Miyamoto quote, something.
A bad game is bad forever. A late game is eventually good or something.
Well, I guess that no longer applies in today's paradigm where a bad game can be patched, but...
Yeah. But
all right. Yeah. Come on, Sony. The frustrating thing is that, like, I know Sony has it in them to not be stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
no, they're just not interested.
They're just stupid right now. Okay. I think that'll do it for us this week. Somehow we went like 2 hours this week, but I guess we had a lot to say.
I love me some handhelds.
All right, thank you guys for listening. You can follow us at Podcast Game Talk on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Please like, rate, and review us on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcast services you use, and click the link in the description to join our Discord and talk to us there. Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.